And good morning, Queensland. So, first of all, we've only had 2 new cases overnight of COVID, but they're in hotel quarantine, so we're not concerned about those. One case was from Papua New Guinea. And in additional good news, people are still getting tested, which is fantastic, and that's what we want to see. If you've got any symptoms, please still continue to go and get tested. 5,905 tests in the past 24 hours. Well, Queensland today is a really important day, and yesterday Cabinet made the decision in relation to the voluntary assisted dying bill that it will be introduced into Parliament next week. The Law Reform Commission handed that report to the Attorney-General, and today it is tabled in the Parliament for all of Queensland to see. Can I please ask Queenslanders to take the time to read the report? The executive summary of about 58 pages is very clear and concise. And over the next few months, I ask Queenslanders as well that we have a respectful debate when it comes to very deeply personal issues surrounding voluntary assisted dying. During the October election, I made a commitment to Queenslanders that a re-elected Palaszczuk government would introduce laws to give people that choice, and we will do that. I've also made it abundantly clear that government MPs will have a conscience vote. That is the right thing to do. I also want the public community to have a respectful debate. There are going to be opposing views. I understand this. But I also understand these are deeply personal issues. And in fact, having seen firsthand the suffering of both my grandmother and my uncle, it is heartbreaking, and no one wants to see that. But it is a deeply personal choice, and this bill will give people the choice to end their life with dignity. We often talk about the dignity of work. Well, there is dignity as well in the way in which people choose to end their life. That's not to say that palliative care is not an option as well, because we know that palliative care is being utilised at the moment by thousands of Queenslanders. And that's why my government is investing $171 million to ensure that people have that choice. The Law Reform Commission has done exactly what we asked them to do. They have provided a comprehensive bill to Cabinet for the Parliament to consider. The legislation will be introduced. I will introduce that legislation next week into the Queensland Parliament. It will then go to the Health Committee, and it will go to the Health Committee for a period of 12 weeks. That's double the time that committees usually get, because this is such an important piece of legislation. This is such a historic reform. We want to make sure that there's plenty of opportunity for stakeholders to put their case. And I do want to acknowledge the great work that Aaron Harper did as chair of that committee when he went right across Queensland and did thousands of consultations. So I really want to thank Aaron for that. In September, we will basically, the majority of that sitting will be the debate on this bill. And I hope that once again it will be a respectful debate, and I'm quite sure that when it comes to these issues, people will tell their own personal stories about it. The other thing that I'm also very pleased that's in the bill, which was an issue that was raised with me a lot, is in relation to the provision for health professionals and entities to be a conscientious objector as well. So that's also contained in the bill, and I'm quite sure that's going to alleviate a lot of concerns. I'm very supportive of this bill. The time is right. The time is right, and Queenslanders have spoken. They have raised this issue with me, which is why I made it an election commitment. And once again, I ask Queenslanders to look closely to look at the Law Reform Commission report, to follow the debate, to follow the committee discussions about this, because this is really important to you. And the Attorney-General and the Health Minister will go through some of the criteria, but it is very comprehensive and it gives people fundamentally that choice. So I'll hand over now to the Deputy Premier. And I do want to thank the Deputy Premier, the Attorney-General, the Health Minister. Everybody has worked so collaboratively on this issue because it is about people. It is fundamentally about people and their families and the choices that they have to make if they want to make that choice to end their life with dignity. Thank you, DP.
Thanks, Premier. I'd like to welcome the Queensland Law Reform Commission's report and thank them for their work. It is a logical, thorough and compelling report, and at its heart is the endeavour to limit the suffering of Queenslanders at the end of their life. This is a very important milestone on a long journey. The Parliamentary Committee went through an extensive process. We then referred their report to the Queensland Law Reform Commission. They have now returned that report and it has been tabled. It will go to the Parliament next week. The Parliamentary Committee will again look at it for that period of 12 weeks, as the Premier outlined, before it will be debated by the Parliament, and then a 15-month implementation timeframe. So this is an important point in a long journey. We'd urge all Queenslanders to read and consider the report. Now is their chance, another chance for them to have their say. The report makes a very important distinction. This is not about suicide. This is about voluntary assisted dying. It must be voluntary without coercion. It is assisted by health professionals and the person must be dying. It includes a range of safeguards, but it also includes protections for those who are suffering at the end of their lives, for health professionals who might want to assist them, and for their family members who support them. It's a very important issue. It's close to many people's hearts, and I'm just really proud to be part of a government that's been able to progress it under the Premier's leadership.
Well, I want to join with the Premier and Deputy Premier in thanking the Queensland Law Reform Commission for their incredible work on what is a very complex issue. They have provided a legal framework for voluntary assisted dying, a framework that is compassionate, safe and practical. We will be introducing this bill into the Parliament next week, and this brings Queensland into line with Victoria, Tasmania and Western Australia. And as the Premier has said, our Parliamentary Committee will be given time to hear from Queenslanders on this bill. We know there has been extensive consultation, first through the Parliamentary Inquiry, then with the Queensland Law Reform Commission, but we want to get this right and we want to make sure we've got the strongest possible safeguards. So we are encouraging Queenslanders once again, once they've had a look at the report is lengthy, but thankfully there is a report summary which the Premier has said is very clear and concise and maps out who is eligible and the process to access voluntary assisted dying, and we want them to have their say through the Parliamentary Committee process. We know that this is a very complex and deeply personal issue. We know that the majority of Queenslanders absolutely support voluntary assisted dying, but we also know that there are those who strongly oppose it because end-of-life decisions are deeply personal, and that is why we have a conscience vote for Members of Parliament, as we should. And I once again commend the work of the Queensland Law Reform Commission and urge Queenslanders to have their say.
Firstly, can I thank the Premier for her leadership? Firstly, in referring this off to a parliamentary committee and then making the decision to have the Queensland Law Reform Commission do a body of work and present the government with a bill. I want to acknowledge the QLRC for once again their very professional and expert advice and body of work which has delivered a bill that clearly shows that they have listened to the many different views on what is a very complex and personal matter. There are many safeguards in this bill and I ask the community and stakeholders to take the opportunity to, through the parliamentary committee process, consider those safeguards. Importantly, those safeguards include ensuring that 2 medical practitioners assess an individual for their eligibility to ensure that they have decision-making capacity, and that decision-making capacity endures throughout the whole journey. Also, it is extremely important, as is spelt out in the bill, that part of that eligibility is those medical practitioners being satisfied that that individual is making their decision voluntarily and without coercion. That is a really important factor that I know people want to see and wanted to see in any legislation coming forward, and that's what we see in this draft bill. It also recognises the beliefs of medical practitioners and entities in not wanting to participate in the assistance of voluntary assisted dying, and that's why the bill also provides for conscientious objection for medical practitioners, speech pathologists and entities in relation to participating in voluntary assisted dying. As the Premier has said, it is the intention of the government, if this bill is passed, to have it operational within 15 months from when it's passing. So Queensland Health will do the work to ensure that we have the oversight and the training in place so that when the time comes that people who want to access voluntary assisted dying have the option of doing that at that time. And I look forward to working with my department to work through that process, but I encourage all Queenslanders to have their say through the parliamentary committee process. Now is the time, not so much to debate whether we should or we shouldn't, but to actually look at the legislation and say, does this legislation deliver on what I believe should occur for the people of Queensland, to give an option for end of life that we believe everyone should have access to. Thank you.
Can I just, Premier, you'll be introducing the legislation.
Yes.
Just a time frame. So it's introduced,
Oh, yeah.
introduced next week. It's debated in September.
In September.
When will it pass?
It will be, then it will come into effect 15 months afterwards, so January 2023.
Before it's actually voted on.
No, it'll be voted on in the September sittings this year.
Yep.
Yep.
And then
There's been extensive consultation already. We've had the committee that's done a whole lot of work throughout Queensland, the Law Reform Commission. Honestly, when you read this report, it is so comprehensive. They are the right body to have done this work.
what about those who might want to die with dignity before January 23?
This is what has been agreed to, and in other jurisdictions, it's roughly taken the same amount of time as well. So you've got to get everything set up, everything ready. You've got to get the training in place. It's very complex to put into operation. So we've got to make sure that's all done correctly. So we need that time to do that.
With both sides offering a conscience vote, I understand the only thing is, would you expect this to pass, or how close do you expect it to be?
Well, what I'd ask the media to do as well is to actually just be respectful of MPs, to give them time to actually have a look at this bill as well. I know there's going to be a lot of people wanting to know how people are going to vote. I just ask for respect at this time so people can have the opportunity to read the bill and to make their mind up. But everybody will know when it comes to September, because people will be able to give their speeches and to say how they will be voting.
Premier, you said the time is right now. Why is that?
Honestly, there has been a lot of discussion about this in the community, and I do travel a lot across this state, and people have been raising it with me. I do honestly believe the time is right. It's happened in other jurisdictions as well, and at some stage we're going to get to the situation where the whole nation has them in place. Yeah.
Church leaders are almost universal in their opposition to this.
Yeah.
What do you say to them? Last time at the election they said that you blindsided them by fast-tracking the proposal.
Well, Michael, before I came here this morning, I spoke to a couple of the church leaders. I know that there's going to be even more consultation. Tomorrow the Deputy Premier will be leading those consultations with the Attorney General and also the Health Minister. And look, I don't think it matters what religion you are, because there are going to be people who have their own views on this, regardless of religion as well. I'm a Catholic. I've thought about this long and hard. I've had a lot of personal experiences in the last 12 months, and I have made up my mind based on what I have seen and those experiences. And like I said, this is a choice, and it's not going to be the right choice for a lot of people, but it's going to be an option there for people. And far be it for me to make that individual choice on how a person wishes to end their life. In fact, there's a very good quote here from the Law Reform Commission. They said, "It's not a choice between life and death, but a choice for those who are dying to exercise some control over the timing and manner of their death."
It's all about giving them the right.
It's the right, it's about dignity, it's about that choice.
Palliative Care Queensland says they need at least 200 million.
Sorry?
Palliative Care Queensland says they need more funding, at least 200 million a year, to be able to support their services. Is there any more money that will go towards?
Look, at the moment we've allocated like 171 million. I mean, we've got to just, make sure that we do have a very strong palliative care system in this state, and if the need is needed over time to increase that, of course we will look at that. But I know a number of people I know at the moment are currently going through palliative care as well, and it's a very difficult situation, very difficult.
Can you think of a more contentious, potentially divisive debate or legislation in recent history?
I don't know if it's going to be contentious. I really hope that it's going to be respectful. I think we saw with the termination of pregnancy bill, the majority of that debate was respectful. This one here, I hope, will be respectful.
Premier, the Law Reform Commission obviously set out a framework, but as you mentioned, there's still some more consultation with the committee and with Queenslanders. Is there a chance that what's proposed here might look slightly different when it eventually is debated in September?
Look, it may. I mean, on the face of it, it looks very comprehensive to me, but that's what the committee process is there for. They may find something like, we might have the AMA might say something, or I can't preempt what everyone's going to say until they see it. So let them work through it. There may be something there we haven't picked up.
In Victoria, doctors aren't allowed to suggest this as a course of action for patients. Will they be able to in Queensland?
I might get the Health Minister to address that, or the Attorney. Yeah,
So they cannot proactively propose it, but if an individual is asking, then they are to provide information, and in certain circumstances it can be provided as a collective group of information, including the options around palliative care. But on its own, a medical practitioner cannot say, I think you should consider voluntary assisted dying. So it's very much in line with Victoria in that respect.
So they can object and walk away.
They can absolutely have a conscientious objection as well, and there's mechanisms to deal with that, so that importantly the individual themselves still gets to access that option, but respecting that individual medical practitioners and entities may be conscientious objectors.
Does a patient, considering, do they need family support or approval as well, or is it just that?
So there's a whole step, there's multiple steps in this, including the original medical practitioner as the coordinator, another consulting practitioner. There are witnesses, there's to be 2 witnesses that cannot be beneficiaries to a will or financial direct beneficiaries, but there's also a contact person. So at the point where the decision is made, then a contact person is appointed, who could be the person who goes and actually receives the medicine on behalf of the individual to take that to them. So there are a number of processes and safeguards to ensure that this is truly voluntary, without coercion, and that the person has clear decision-making capacity throughout.
And how is that defined in terms of the capacity, and how is someone defined as dying, and also the method of assisted dying? Can you go through that?
So there's a lot of detail there that I could probably spend a fair bit of time, and the Attorney General and Deputy Premier may want to go through it also in detail. Look, there's a number of measures. When it comes to determining decision-making capacity, this is something that is done on a regular basis already when it comes to enduring powers of attorney, making wills, advanced health directives. They all have to have capacity and decision-making capacity. So this is not a new concept at all. And so, the same consideration that medical practitioners would have to make in relation to this decision making is the same in relation to all of those areas, all about ensuring that the most vulnerable people in our society are protected from any coercion, and that, and importantly what this bill does is says, not just at the first point of saying to a doctor, I want to pursue voluntary assisted dying, but right up to the point of administering that medicine, they still have decision-making capacity. So that's really important.
If a doctor does conscientiously object, are they going to be required to refer to another doctor who does support voluntary?
So there's a couple of things. One, they can do that, but there's also going to be a central nurse navigator system. So we will have a central contact point where people will be able to, anywhere in the state, contact this nurse navigator system to actually identify where they can access medical practitioners that would assist them. So they don't have to go shopping around themselves and trying to find someone at what is a really difficult time for them and their family.
What happens if that person loses a capacity before?
They won't be able to fulfil the requirements to be eligible.
And the two medical practitioners that are required, so do they have to be doctors or?
Yes, so medical practitioners have to be doctors, and there is a criteria as far as their specialty or how long they've been practising as well, and there's training required of them. But the person who can administer it could be a nurse practitioner, ultimately, once the decision's made.
I understand the other states said one of the terms 6 months. Why 12 months in Queensland?
Look, I would encourage everyone to go through in detail the QLRC report in looking at the reasoning behind that. You know, different jurisdictions are doing different things. Victoria has a 6 and 12 month sort of criteria. The QLRC has outlined 12 months. They thought it appropriate to not try to distinguish between different illnesses. And yeah, I believe they've got the balance right there, and I think it's reasonable that they've said, you know, where you're expected that your lifespan is no more than 12 months.
Can we ask, sorry, just about you health minister, sorry. The AstraZeneca, the young nurse who developed blood clots after the jab, is there a concern that might further dent public confidence?
Look, so there is a really thorough reporting process when it comes to any negative reactions from either Pfizer or AstraZeneca. That all gets reported up to the TGA, and it's for the TGA to consider all of the elements, any underlying factors, the circumstances around any individual's reactions, including getting those particular blood clots, to see whether they're proposing any change to the advice. As far as I know, there is no changes from the TGA at this stage, but I know they consider every new case.
So can you understand if people are reluctant?
And that is why the Queensland Government has called on the Commonwealth to expand the availability of GPs who are accredited to administer AstraZeneca to all GPs who are part of the National Immunisation Program. The reason why that's important is because the best person to advise an individual of the risks and to help them reach informed consent is their own GP who knows their medical history. I think that is what, and much of our evidence and surveys of the general public who haven't been vaccinated yet, asking them, would you get vaccinated? A large number say, I'll get any vaccine that my GP recommends. So they have confidence in their GP. That is the person who's best to advise them.
I understood frontline healthcare workers were supposed to get the Pfizer vaccine.
So the majority are getting the Pfizer vaccine because the majority of our workforce is under the age of 50, so they're eligible to get the Pfizer. And as we have said all along, if we have excess Pfizer on any given day, we will ensure that we continue to administer that to any health worker who is available, because we don't want to see any of that wasted. Also, remembering Pfizer, if we're using Pfizer for our health workers, it means we can get our health workforce vaccinated far quicker, and they're at higher risk because they are dealing with COVID patients, because it's only a 3-week turnaround between getting fully vaccinated as opposed to 12.
So why would you have been given the AstraZeneca?
Oh, look, I'm not aware of the particular circumstances around that individual and why she might have got it. She may be over 50 and she may have chosen to... But
she's 18.
well, I don't have the circumstances at all around that individual and why they would have got AstraZeneca. And it may be they got AstraZeneca before the changes in April, because there are people who got AstraZeneca before the changes by the TGA who were getting their second one 12 weeks later. So she may very well be someone, because some of these thrombosis response we've got are weeks after the individual got their first injection. So it may be that she got it before the TGA changes occurred.
Premier, would you support a push for vaccinated Australians to be able to avoid domestic restrictions like lockdowns or
well,
restrictions?
I think they're the sort of issues that need to be discussed at National Cabinet, and there's been no paper sent around on that at the moment.
And on the pace of the vaccine rollout here, are we too far behind the other states?
No, I don't think so at all. We're very decentralised, and we're in the process now of getting ready to set up our Pfizer hubs. So a lot of work and planning's going into that.
Are you happy with the rate? I mean, Queensland is the second lowest in the country.
Look, I think what we'll find is once we have the vaccination hubs that will be set up across regional Queensland, I think there's going to be a lot more confidence then of people wanting to go and get their vaccines.
So
a lot of people are still getting their flu vaccines as well. Then they have to wait until they get their other vaccines.
But that's the same elsewhere in Australia. Are you satisfied with the rollout in Queensland?
At this stage I am, because we are decentralised and there's a lot of planning going into when we've got to open up a lot of centres. We're not like Sydney and Melbourne where it's concentrated in the capital cities. We're very decentralised.
Can we talk about WellCamp?
Yeah, sure.
There's been a lot of discussion about WellCamp.
Yes.
Toing and froing.
Yep.
You say that the feds don't give aviation approval. The feds say that you don't give enough information. Meanwhile, it's 2 months later and nothing's happened, and your government says that there's a need for a quarantine facility.
Yeah,
there
is. Yep, I absolutely believe that. In fact, we should have, and the federal government's had a lot of time now to have set up a lot of national quarantine facilities across this nation. We have seen how successful Howard Springs has been. And if you're talking about free movement of travel, especially around the East Coast where most of the population is centred, if you had regional quarantine facilities away from your capital cities and away from the majority of population, there would be less needs for lockdowns into the future.
So there's a current facility called Homeground out of Calliope that was...
we ruled that out.
Which was suggested, and
that
has been backed by, privately at least, the Queensland Health Department and the police.
It
has 1,400
we went through that one.
Ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's not ready to go. It, with all due respect, Michael, in relation to that, we actually ruled that out because it wasn't close to an international flight centre. So the reason...
Rockhampton has got international approval.
It's too far to travel as well.
55 minutes.
Yeah, well, we're not proposing that. We're looking at another option.
Is that because of an ALP candidate that's the mayor that's running in the seat of Flint?
No, not at all.
Not my backyard?
No.
There's been no directive from Queensland Health not to give the AstraZeneca to at Queensland clinics, has it?
No, not to my knowledge, but I think it's, the vaccine rollout for AstraZeneca is mainly happening at the GPs. So that's what I've been hearing from GPs.
Gotta go.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time.
You're hanging behind.
Sorry.
You're hanging behind.
To talk about the spit.